I mean, I don't know anybody, thankfully, I mean, from radio's point of view, that was idiotic enough to give somebody on the street the biggest show on the radio station, like live on breakfast radio in Dublin at 10 to 9, and representing the school, and the school headmaster listening to everything because he's very cautious about, are we letting this radio station in? Like, I don't think I've ever laughed so much in my life. There was nothing he wouldn't turn his hand to. I was young, but I don't remember the ins and outs that I now know as an adult, but I do remember him being very successful and then having it all taken away.
What do you least like spending money on?
My kids' Revolut requests.
My name is Kaz Mooney and I'm the host of Mooney Talks. Here we talk to successful individuals and find out the path they took, the decisions they made, and the financial choices that they made along the way. In today's episode, we're going to be talking to Dave Moore, who you might know from Today FM's The Dave Moore Show, where thousands of listeners listen daily to Dave Moore's dad jokes. I am so excited for you to discover some of the interesting stories that Dave has had in his career. So hi Dave, how are you?
Yes, I'm great. How are you doing?
Good. I'm doing great. It's so great to have you on.
It's an honour to be here. Thank you very much.
So excited to interview you because it's been the first time I ever get to interview you, and you've interviewed me before.
Many times. Yeah. It's a kind of a full circle thing we're having now. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So this is my first podcast. So,
wow.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm extra honoured then.
Yeah. So this podcast is going to be mostly talking about how you got to be the success you are today. So I'd really like to go on that journey with you, and I'd love to know more about you and how you started. What was your earliest beginning memories?
Of my radio career or working in general? In general.
Yeah.
My life in general?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Take you right back.
Okay, I remember. I live in Portmarnock in Dublin, and I've always lived in Portmarnock in Dublin. Yeah. And I do remember my family home is different to the home I lived in first, but in the same, like 2 streets away.
Yeah.
But I do remember I lived there till I was 4, and I remember it having a really steep driveway.
Yeah.
So I just remember that always being like an exciting thing to run down the driveway and your legs would carry you as fast as you could. You know what I mean? That was always fun. Great friends around that area. Just directly across the road was Gary, my friend, and he had a lovely dog called Rebel, and we used to just hang out all the time. So that's early. That's pre-4. You know, even before school. I just have loads of memories of that house, and I see it now. It's hilarious because my kids. We drive past and I'm like, that's the house Daddy used to live in. They're like, what? You live with Nana? I was like, no, before that. I'm like, yeah, so it's all very confusing. But yeah, just great memories of Portmarnock.
Yeah.
As a kid, just a great place to grow up. It's why I ended up back there as a
you're
family
back
man.
There.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. Like, you know, I was going to live anywhere else. Not that I didn't against Portmarnock. I loved it, but I studied languages. I was working in music and entertainment. I lived in LA. I lived in Russia. Like, I definitely wasn't going to move in 30 seconds away from my parents, but that's what I did. You know what I mean? When you sit down and try and say, okay, well, you know, where will I set up a family home?
Yeah.
And where's a great place for kids?
And that's where you ended up.
It's a great place for kids.
So you went to school, I assume, near there.
Yep, literally where my kids go now, the same national school. Yeah.
And when you were doing, say, your leaving cert, what was your plans for the future?
Rockstar.
Rockstar.
Yeah, absolute rockstar. That was the plan.
What led you to that?
Heavy metal. Fell in love with heavy metal at the age of about 11.
Wow.
My cousins are responsible for that, the Lynches in Limerick. And it totally consumed me. And I just became obsessed with guitar and obsessed with singing and playing drums and learning everything. So, by the time my leaving cert rolled around, I was concentrating on my leaving cert and doing the best I could. And my parents I'd made a deal with them that if I was a good boy and did well on my leaving cert and went to college, that they would help me do whatever it was I wanted to do afterwards. And their assumption, of course, was, well, he'll go to college, he'll get a job, and then this will all just go away. No. So no, I was a good boy. I did business studies in Russian in Trinity.
Russian?
Yeah.
What led you to Russian?
So it was pretty simple. I wanted to do business. I wanted to go to Trinity, and I wanted to do a foreign language. I already spoke French and German by the time I left school, so they had 3 choices, French, German, or Russian. I went, well, I'll do Russian then.
Yeah.
So I studied that for 4 years, lived in St. Petersburg for a year, went to St. Petersburg University, studied business through Russian for
Wow.
my third year, yeah, and lived there. It was a phenomenal experience. That was back in the mid-90s. It was a wild place then. And yeah, so then when I finished and got my degree and got job offers in Moscow and things, I turned them all down and studied jazz for a year.
Was that hard to do?
Not for me. It was hard for my parents to hear me tell them that I was turning down stupid money.
Really?
Yeah, because look, you're 22 or whatever, 21, whatever it was, and things were different in Russia, and like there was.
And up until
substantial
that
offers.
point, had you found things easy financially, or like?
I did, because my parents
Yeah.
were funding everything. Yeah, no, I'm eternally grateful now, because I absolutely realize
Yeah.
now
Yeah.
what sacrifices they
Yeah.
went through to allow me to
Yeah.
do whatever it was I wanted to do, whether it was, buy a new guitar, or I need an amp now for the guitar, or I need to go to this place to do this gig. Will you drive me? All those things,
Yeah.
that you only realize as an adult
Yeah.
what your parents did for you. But yeah, from a financial point of view, even the year in Russia, it would have opened my eyes maybe in a way that even being in college didn't. Because in college, I still got the train into work, or into college.
Yeah.
Got the train home. I didn't live away from home. I lived at home, so I didn't have rent or anything like that. I had seen my friends get involved in that scenario, but for me, it wasn't there. But then when I went to Russia, it was like, no, hang on.
And presumably back then, it would be so different to nowadays, where you can just send some money across, or you can even just check in and see see that person's face.
It was. I'd always tell this story and to try and illustrate to people. If I wanted to communicate with my family, there were two options. One was I went to a local hotel and sent a fax. And the other option was you went to effectively like a large telephone booth, like a building that would have like 6 private booths with doors that would shut and a phone. But there's no numbers on the phone, it's just literally a receiver. So you'd walk up to the lady and you would write down the number you wanted her to call, and she would call your parents in wherever. Now, the way I worked it was that would cost me, say, I'm going to make up a number now because I can't remember, say 3,000 rubles, right? So I would pay 3,000 rubles and she would call my parents' house. Then they wouldn't understand Russian. She'd be like, blah, 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 or whatever. They were like, what? And then they'd hang up. But then they knew the number. They would ring back the number and I get charged half the rate. And I would sit in one of the private booths and we'd have a 7-minute conversation, and it would cost 14,000 rubles, and I go, I gotta go, whatever. But that was it. Like that was
Almost
the only
like
way to communicate.
A prison phone call.
Yeah, no, honestly, not dissimilar. And there was email, in fairness. This was 1995. Email was a thing, but my parents didn't have email. Like I had it in university, you know what I mean? So I could occasionally send an email to another friend in university but you didn't check your email. You had to check your email in 1995 was you had to go to the computer lab,
log on,
you had to book a time, you had to log onto the thing,
dial up.
Yeah, like it was all those things. So it was a very different world in terms of communication, and you would essentially go dark, for a lot of time. And obviously, even now, I'm sure people would be fearful of, sending their kid to Russia. No, now, notwithstanding with the war, but I mean, in general, it's not quite the European country that, that we feel, oh, my son's in Spain, my son's in France, my son's in Russia. I remember my mother just going, oh my God, you're going to go to Russia for a year.
But even to fly back, you would probably have to take 1 or 2 flights.
Totally. There were no direct flights.
Yeah.
And look, it's expensive as well. Like to even now, like I've talked about, I'd love to bring my family to see St. Petersburg. It's an incredibly beautiful city. It's unbelievable architecture and culture and amazing. And obviously I speak the language. But for 6 of us to fly to St. Petersburg is more expensive than 6 of us to fly to LA. It's a big deal. So yeah, we haven't quite got back there yet. We will eventually. But yeah, that was probably my first understanding of the fact that it wasn't just, oh, well, everyone's parent pays for them to go on a summer holiday with their friends in Galway, or pays for their monthly bus fare in and out of college or whatever, then it was like, oh no, my parents are really footing a bill here for me to because don't forget, Russia's has always been outside the EU. So Erasmus is a thing that helps even financially between universities. There was no Erasmus with Russia. So like we were literally it was somebody in our university emailed someone in their university, went, there's 5 kids coming across. This cool? And I was like, yeah, should be grand. Like it was that level of organization. Yeah. So that was definitely an eye-opener financially from that point of view.
So you're deciding you're going to put that on hold and you're going to pursue your music
So
career.
I asked my parents yet again, will they now pay for my private year-long jazz professional musicianship course? And they say yes, because no, in fairness, we'd made that
You'd
deal.
made that deal.
And I held up my end of the bargain.
Yes.
And in fairness to them, they didn't renege on it, and they said, yeah, no, absolutely. So by the time that college year was up, and the reason I chose that was I'm quite focused when it comes to doing something. So because I was doing my finals, I was focused on being a student and I was studying, and that was kind of where my brain was at. And I knew if I switched from that in a day to like, okay, now I want to be a rock star, that was going to be really difficult.
Yeah.
And the adjustment would be too big. So I figured, well, is there some way I can study, but dial down the level of study and dial up the level of music? And this course was the kind of way. And so that was a commitment by them, and it was a good idea from my point of view. By the time that year finished, I had taken out a massive bank loan and bought a studio.
Wow.
Now, this was a studio in my bedroom in my parents' house, but in 1997, which this was, or was it 98? Maybe 98. It was not a MacBook and a microphone like it is today. It was thousands and thousands of pounds on samplers and power amplifiers and microphones and amps and guitars and recording hard disks and things that we now take for granted. But back then they weren't there, and they were very expensive. So,
and steadily upgrading
all the time.
Yeah,
all the time. And so when I took that loan out, I realized that I couldn't and I wouldn't ask them to pay for that. So I had to get a job. So here's Johnny 2 degrees with his business degree and his Russian degree, and I just worked in the local petrol station.
Oh wow!
For about 3 years, paying off the bank loan basically, while beginning my career as a musician. At that point, I had long decided that I didn't want to be a rock star anymore. I wanted to be a writer producer, so someone who sits in a studio, writes songs, collaborates with artists on songs, but lets the artist go and be the artist.
And what brought you to there?
The first time I was in a proper recording studio, I just realized this is way better than live. And that was just my personal feeling on it. That's what, like, I felt like, you know, the control, like when you're, I suppose it was probably to do with the fact that I was in a metal band and it was the early 90s. Like, it's very hard to make your guitar sound good.
Yeah.
And it's very hard to make two guitars, a bass and drums sound good, and a screaming vocalist.
And it's such a distinctive sound.
It is. And then you hear it on a record and you're like, oh, that's what I want to sound like, not this noisy, feedbacky nonsense thing over here. So look, you can invest time, money, effort, and you can make anything work. But I guess when I went into a studio and I realized how the recording process works, how the multi-track system works, how you can overdub and create these things that can't be done live or can't be done live easily, that became a real draw for me. And then I realized that while I was a good guitarist and a decent singer, I was a much better writer.
Okay.
So I started to write, and then that was the career path then that I laid out for myself, was I'm going to be a writer-producer, and I'm someday going to write and produce a song for Rihanna or Britney or whoever. And that was the aim.
Yeah. And so you're doing this music career and you are paying off your bank loan. How did you get to where you are now?
So
it seems like such a jump.
It is such a jump. When you are a working artist, in whatever you're doing, you will be offered the chance to do things that are just paid work. And when you work for yourself, you'll take them. So what I used to do was I would write songs and produce songs and work with bands and artists and acts and whatever. That was the dream. And then someone would go, hey, I need a jingle for a Kit Kat. Cool, I'll give that a go. Hey, I need music for a film. Oh, I'll do that. There's a TV show needs a score for a documentary. So whatever it was, I would do. And that was part of my, I suppose, my USP in the music industry was there were lots of people who were good at one thing. I was very good at a lot of things. So if you needed a jazz piece, a hip hop piece, a metal piece, a pop piece, an orchestral piece, whatever it would be, I'd get it. Now, there are guys in those individual disciplines, there are guys who are way better than I am. There's a way better jazz guy and a way better classical music guy and a way better rock guy. But there's one guy who can do a pretty passable job on all of those, and that was kind of me. So one of the things I did was I recorded voiceover demos for people. So, Kaz, you'd come to me and you go, hiya, I'm an actress and I've been on Fair City and now I want to get into voiceover work. So I've got these scripts and you come to my studio and I'd record you and then we'd cut them together with music that I would write that would sound like it might be on an ad, whatever, but it's my music because obviously you need to clear the rights and all that. And then I'd burn you a CD because again it was the early or late 90s, early 90s, and you would have 20 of them or 40 of them, and you would go around to the recording studios and the agents and hand them out, and that's how people would hear what you sound like, and then they'd go, oh, there's a girl called Cash, she might be good for an ad about a book or whatever. So I was doing that for comedians and actors and whatever, and then I was working on a rap musical about the political history of Ireland with Des Bishop. And we were out to dinner one night on the tour of this play. It was brilliant. It was called Rap Era. It was actually an amazing musical. But he said to me, he's like, because we were good friends. We still are good friends. But he was saying to me, you should do voiceovers. You get money. Like I just did one last week. I got 500 quid. And I was like, what? I was like, how long in the studio for? He was like 20 minutes. I was like, oh my God.
I've a loan to pay.
Yes, seriously. So I was like, yeah, but you need a demo. You need an agent. He goes, he's the biggest agent in Ireland. And the guy who's producing the play, who I assumed was a play producer, because that's how I was introduced to him. This is Richard, who produces plays. He's Richard of Lisa Richards, which is one of the biggest, probably the biggest acting agency in Ireland. And Des kind of shouted over the dinner, goes, will you take Dave on as a voiceover artist? And he was like, yeah, no problem. I was like, okay, I need to make a demo. So I made a demo. It went into all the studios with the backing of the biggest agent in Ireland. And I got one job as a cracked-voiced pizza delivery guy. I think it was for Apache Pizza. And the next phone call I got was this really weird one from a lovely lady called Karen, who wouldn't tell me anything about a job or what it was, but she wanted to meet me in town that day. So I got in my car and I drove into town and met her in a cafe. And we're sitting down talking like this. And then two men came in and sat down with us. She introduced them as Dan and John, but didn't give me any context. And then they proceeded to join the conversation and interview me. And I was like, what is happening here? They left. She said, I did very well. I said, you'll have to tell me what you're talking about. I did very well at what? Oh, don't worry about that. That was a Monday. Came back in on a Wednesday. She handed me a microphone and a mini disc recorder because it was 1990, 2001 or whatever. And that's how you did things. And I walked around Dublin, described some stuff, came back to her, gave her the mini disc, read some stuff off a sheet, said goodbye. And then on the Friday that week, she brought me into a building and brought me into a room and walked in. And there was a guy in there and she kind of let me walk in and went, Dave, that's Dermot. Dermot, that's Dave. You two get on. See you later. And she shut the door. I'm just looking at this guy and he's looking at me and I'm going, how's it going? He's like, all right. I said, sorry, do you know what this is? And he was like, what do you mean? I was like, where am I? And he's like, this is 98 FM. And I was like, a radio station? Yeah. I was like, I think I'm in the wrong place. He's like, do you work on radio? I was like, no. And I said, what do you do? And he goes, yeah, I work on radio. Yeah, I do some comedy on a show and I read the news and I think they might want to give me like the breakfast show on 98 FM. And I was like, oh, cool. That sounds great, man. Fair play to you. Yeah. I'm going to head off in a minute when she comes back. Yeah, cool. Anyway, so where are you from? What do you know? So very quickly we just bonded as two guys and got on really well. And she came back and he was like, so how are you getting on? And we were like, yeah, great, but this is radio. I'm not supposed to be here. She's like, no, you are. Like, we want to offer you the breakfast show on 98. And I was like, I've never even been in a radio station. She's like, yeah. And that was 2002. And literally, here we are 22 years later. It's all I've done since. Yeah.
Jeez. The rest is history.
Yeah, and literally that was it. And I mean, I don't know anybody, thankfully, from radio's point of view, that was idiotic enough to give somebody on the street the biggest show on the radio station. Like, it was crazy, but yeah, it turns out it was what I'm good at.
I think it really takes somebody who's open for that, though, because there's so many moments where you could have walked out or said, no, I'm not coming in today. I have things to do.
Look, I genuinely believe that, I'm lucky and I believe people can be lucky, but I also believe you need to be open to the luck. Mm-hmm. Like the luck is there.
Yeah.
But if you're, as you said, if you're closed or there are reasons, and sometimes it can be unavoidable that you just go, well, I can't take that opportunity now for this reason or that reason. But at that point in my life, I was certainly open to a change. I'd lived in LA for a while with my girlfriend at the time. And we had come back, and as we were kind of flying back into Ireland, I was realizing, oh, hang on, I've lived with her now for 3 months in LA. And
Kind of like her.
I really like her. And now we're both going back to our parents' houses. I don't want that. I want to live with this woman. So I suppose I was prepared to take on a project that would be more secure. Like when you work for yourself, you know, it's you can get the bulk of your money in one paycheck at one point in the year, and then
But you
you've got to
don't
be
know what's
really
coming.
clever. Yeah, and are you clever when you're 22? No, you know what I mean. You're like, oh, I can buy a guitar. Oh no, I've no money for rent now because I bought a guitar. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So by the time we came back, I was like, no, hang on, I really want to live with this woman. I want to get a place in town. I want, you know, all those things. So I was open to the possibility of there being a regular job with regular income, but also it was sold to me, and why wouldn't you? In that, oh well, it's 6 to 10, so you'll be finished at 10.
Yeah.
Oh, cool. So I don't usually get up until 10, so I can go back to the studio and start work from 12.
Yes.
No, because you don't finish at 10. You finish at 2. You've never been more tired in your life, and you just fall asleep on the sofa, so you never do any more work. So that was a real challenge, was getting used to the fact that the music, the studio, those things were now going to have to be a side project and not
And
the main thing.
presumably a lot goes on before and after the radio show.
Yeah, breakfast radio less so before, because you start so
Yeah.
early. Now, the way I like to do things, I would do quite a bit before. So I would be in at 5 for a 6 o'clock show. Now my show is 9, so I'd be in at 7 for a 9 o'clock show. But yeah, you do most of your work after. For those early morning shows particularly, we would grab food at 10, and from 10:30 until 1:30, you'd be constantly working. And breakfast shows, they demand a lot of, certainly they did then, they demanded a lot of content. So there's a lot of work to do. So
And some of the first stories of the day are all hitting that breakfast show.
Oh, absolutely. Like look, listen, it's one of the most, radio is one of the most high pressured environments there is that I've ever seen anyone work in. And you have the mic, and you have the freedom that the mic gives you, that it's your mouth, the microphone, and pretty much the speakers is the next thing that happens. But also with that comes like so much responsibility and so much pressure. And I'm live for 3 hours a day. It's 15 hours a week of content.
It's a lot of things you could say.
Yeah, there's a lot of opportunity to get yourself cancelled, particularly in the last couple of years. No, but there is. And I mean, you know, I don't know another discipline that requires that much live work.
Yeah,
like
on the
television,
ball.
even live television, it's an hour, or maybe it's 2 hours a week, or maybe 6 live recordings or whatever. This is just literally me, brain, mouth, microphone, you. And in there, if there's a mistake, you're going to hear it. There's no filter. There's nothing. So that is a real challenge on it, but something I absolutely love. You know?
Has there been any moments?
I mean, of course there have. I've been doing it for 22
Any that
years.
stand out?
Yeah, I mean, like, I remember we were doing a show we used to have a big bus, a broadcast double-decker bus. It was called two things. One was called the Thunder Bus, one was called Big Red. I can't remember which one we were on at the time, but we did a broadcast from Joey's school in Fairview. And one of the things was that, because obviously our show was 6 to 10, at 9 o'clock, Dermot he still fit into a uniform because he's so small and slight. So even as an adult, we put him in a 6th year's uniform and sent him into like the 4th class to go in with the teachers in the class, whatever. And that was obviously the funny radio bit. And he had a microphone that he could talk to us from there or whatever. So while he was in there, I got the kids who were just coming into school, because he went in, say, about 8:45. We used to do traffic at 10 to 9. Well, I just grabbed 3 kids off the street, bring them in, sit them down. What's your name? Johnny, Paul, Mikey. Great. Here's the traffic, 1 sentence each. You know, there is a hold up on the M50 and it is going to be delayed by 10 minutes. Thanks, Johnny. Pa. Fairview, where we are, is busy. You know, it was literally that. And so the 3 of them did their thing, and one of the kids held up his A4 pad up on the school, on the window of the bus, and it said, "Say hello to Davy Byrne." And I said, "Oh, look, there's a kid there." He says, his note says, "Say hello to Davy Byrne." And one of the little kids who's on one of those, like, so that their headphones with a microphone, they look like a pilot's headphones. So he's a microphone coming down to his face, and he goes, "Davy Byrne is a shithead." Live on breakfast radio in Dublin at 10 to 9. and representing the school, and the school headmaster listening to everything because he's very cautious about, are we letting this radio station in? Like, I don't think I've ever laughed so much in my life. And he was just talking like the kids talked in the yard to each other. Like, he didn't put two and two together and realize he was coming out live on air. So, look, there's been millions of those moments. Like, I remember at one point, very early on, Dermot used to run the desk. I say used to run the desk. He used to run the desk for like 6 months, and then we swapped and realized this is the only way to do it. But he, at one point, I think he played news off a mini disc, and it started 4 times. He played the start of 4 different songs, and we ended up in traffic. Like, just now, I laugh at it now. At the time, this was the most stressful thing that had ever happened to either of us. We didn't know what way was up, and just there's so many situations where you end up in those.
But as a listener, I think that makes it. Like, that is the moment where you realize that you're again listening to real humans, that they are.
Well, you got to remember at the time, so 2002 when we started, that wasn't really a thing on radio. Radio was still very much the guys who were superhuman and would talk like that and go, that was a great song there from this guy, and here's another great song. And they didn't make mistakes. And that was their profession. And to be fair to them, they didn't make mistakes because they worked so hard not to make a mistake. We came in off the street. There was a turning at that point to bring real people on the radio because the audiences were starting to go, well, that's fine in the middle of the day when I'm putting my head down, I'm tapping on my keyboard, or I'm driving to do a rep, whatever, and I just want to hear songs. I don't mind the guy telling me that was and this is and coming up your chance to win. That's fine. But in the morning time, I want to hear real people. I want to have conversations. I want to hear, So I think it was one of those, perfect storms where we kind of came in at the time when that change was there and people really wanted it. So mistakes like that, yes. The listeners couldn't get enough of that kind of stuff. So, and it persists today,
So if you had somebody you knew or even someone you didn't know that wanted to get into the career you're in and maybe also had that interest in music because you're still very much working with music all the time.
Yeah. And I mean, I still write and produce now. Like, I mean, a couple of years ago, I did music for a Netflix show and, it's a huge honor to still be considered for those kinds of projects. And so like I'll always do music, but I think I work with music every day, not in the way I had envisaged, not in this type of studio I thought I'd be in, but I'm in a studio with faders, with microphones, with compressors, with reverbs, with effects units, and I've got my guitars there, and like I definitely kind of I'm in the world of music.
Yeah.
But I guess not in the way I thought I would be.
Yeah, you have to be somewhat flexible, I suppose, with your ambitions.
I think, look, in general, if you want to work in radio specifically, and if you're absolutely obsessed and married to that, well, what we're doing right now is the way to do that. I tell everybody, do a podcast. And the reason for that is whatever type of radio you want to do, you will be faced with a microphone and a time. You could have, if you're on spin, you could have 15 seconds in between 2 songs. And if you're on News Talk, you could have 2 hours of talk radio to fill. But whatever it is, what you want to do or you think you might end up doing, a podcast about something you're interested in is absolutely the way to go. And you don't need guests. You don't need fancy setups. You literally need a microphone plugged into your MacBook or your laptop, whatever. Hit record and hit publish and put it out there. And people always say, well, like the first episode, the first episode will be terrible versus what the 150 for. But everyone starts like that. Everyone does. You have to start. Yeah. And my first radio show, I'm sure, was appalling. Thankfully, I have no record of it, but I'm sure it was. And here I am doing my 10,000th radio show this morning. So I always use the simple analogy of if you are wherever you are right now today, in 1 year, 52 weeks time, if you do a podcast about anything, it doesn't have to be popular culture. It doesn't have to be true crime. It doesn't have to be finance, money, budgeting, interviewing. If you want to talk about railway tracks, do a podcast on that. It's not for anybody except you.
Yeah.
And in 1 year, you'll have 52 episodes done. If you're dedicated and if you put them out at the same time every single week, you'll actually create an audience for yourself that you didn't realize was there. But in 1 year's time, you'll have 52 episodes to draw on to make a demo. Whereas now you don't have anything.
Yeah.
So do a podcast, make a demo, then get that to the station managers. Let them hear what you sound like when you're passionately talking about something. They don't care if your interest is train tracks or popular culture or movies. It doesn't matter to them because they're not going to give you the specific job that you can only talk about train tracks. But they're going to go, this person sounds really good when they talk passionately about something. So let's get them in and train them up and teach them how to do this and that, whatever. So that's what I would say if it's radio. If it's music, I mean, there are 1,000 different jobs in music, and we all have dreams. As I said, I wanted to be a rock star at one point. I wanted to be a songwriting producer at another point. I never thought I wanted to be a radio broadcaster, but here I am. But there are so many gigs. You just have to be prepared to put in the work, whatever it is.
And financially, is it a good path to go? Or do you have to be quite flexible because it's...
I think as an artist, I think anything you do where you work for yourself or you're trying to, whether that artistry is music or art or acting or writing or sculpture or whatever, it's hard. It's really hard. And few people make it and become unbelievably successful. And most people who do it don't. And if you define your success only by like, well, I must be a millionaire in a house in Beverly Hills, you're probably going to be very disappointed. It's like I coach kids football and I keep saying to the kids all the time, like when we have serious conversations at the end of a season going like, look, there's probably nobody here who's going to be a professional footballer, but that's not what we're here for. We're here to play and to enjoy and to learn about teamwork and improve yourselves, whatever. And that's what you're doing in that situation. So I think being an artist of any description is a difficult thing.
Yeah.
But also you can be an artist. You may not be an artist who becomes a millionaire, but you can be an artist who pays their bills and buys a house and lives with people. And, you can be a professional, whatever it is you want to be. A rock polisher. You can be a professional rock polisher if you work hard enough, create a demand for your skills that gets you an income. So I think you need to prioritize, whether it's the industry you want to be in or the work you want to do versus the financial reward that may come from something more mundane or more. So I always think that like you've got to be prepared. If you really want to work in an industry, be prepared to work in an industry no matter what. Yeah, I think.
I agree. I agree. I think it takes a massive amount of sheer determination and consistency to get to success.
It has to. Yeah. Like I always quote Cristiano Ronaldo, like Manchester United fan or whatever, whatever with the history that went a bit pear-shaped a couple of years ago. But I think as somebody to embody professionalism and determination and focus, he is it. And I remember one of the Ballon d'Or ceremonies, he said talent rather than skill. I think he said it was talent without hard work is nothing. I couldn't agree more. Like, you can be the most, like I know people who are literally, I couldn't tie their laces in terms of them writing a song. They're so much better than I am, or they can sing like angels and I am literally a donkey braying behind them. But they didn't work at it because they just didn't have the same drive I had. So they didn't get the job to write or perform the song, the jingle for that, or to produce the music of it, because they just weren't as into it in terms of the hard work as I was, and that's what it all boils down to. No matter what industry you get into, it's all about hard work. And the harder you work, the more successful you'll be.
Couldn't agree more. So you have a couple of kids yourself.
4 of them.
4 of them.
Yeah.
One more than me.
Oh, well done.
And if they wanted to go into a similar field as you, or even a different field that wasn't necessarily followed from a college course, would you approach them in a similar way to how your parents did? Or
I think in terms of the open-mindedness, yes. In terms of the support, yes. I think I'd probably have to approach it differently because it's a different generation.
Yeah.
College has always been, up until very recently, I think, a solid path to base everything on,
Yeah.
Now, it's not that clear. I know this is the first time, according to educators, this is the first time they don't know what they'll be teaching kids in 10 years'
Yeah.
time, because technology is moving faster than plans for education can. And so as a result, if one of my kids said, I don't want to go to college because I am unbelievably passionate about window cleaning and I'm going to set up my own window cleaning job and I'm going to go and get a job now to pay for the bank loan that I need to buy it, I would absolutely back them and not have them go to college. I don't think I would place the same level of importance on formal education that my parents would have, who were born in the 40s and, were of a different generation to me. At the same time, if one of my kids was just lazy and was like, I don't want to go to college because I just want to hang out and sit in my bedroom in your house, I'd be like, no, that's not happening. So, it would have to be, college will be default, I think, but it would only be on the back of a pretty convincing argument
Yes.
that I would kind of steer them away from that, or help them walk away from that. Because I do think, just as a life skill, I think university and a third level education is an interesting thing to have, because you learn to think for yourself, or at least the kind of neural pathways are put in place for you to think for yourself. Whether you end up doing it or not is different, but it's a different kind of education than secondary school. So I think there's value in that regardless.
It's also one of the first times you really come across different people who haven't lived in the same area and haven't had the same lifestyle as you growing up.
Yeah.
Yeah. And role models. Have you some that you look to now that you have looked to for a long time, or have you some that you have had before and you've maybe left behind?
My dad was always a role model for me for work rate, effort. Like, there was nothing he wouldn't turn his hand to. I was young, but I don't remember the ins and outs that I now know as an adult, but I do remember him being very successful and then having it all taken away. Now, I was probably under 10, so I certainly didn't understand the nuances of what that meant financially. But I remember him having 4 or 5 jobs. So what happened was, he was basically a director in a company that was electronics, and the warehouse burnt down. And as a director, he got nothing because he was fully invested as a director. Not the employees were all looked after by insurance and everything, but not the directors. So he went from, as I said, a very successful businessman to, he used to walk around Portmarnock and sell insurance door to door. He had a machine in the back kitchen that would rivet clutches together, and he would get a box of broken clutches, and he and I would sit there and we would literally rivet the clutches back together, and then he'd get the box and he'd drive the car back to Consort, which was this motor factors in Artane in Dublin, and he'd drop off the boxes, and he must have been getting £2 for that. It would take us all day, but he would do it because he had to pay a mortgage and he had to put food on our table. And as I said, there's no way I knew the details of that when I was 8 or 9 or 10, but I remember him just never not working.
Yeah.
And then around the house, digging the garden, fixing the car. Like, this was the 80s, you fixed your car yourself. The bonnet was always up. There was always an oily rag, So I just remember that kind of work ethic. And then later, after all of that, he took a job in Philips Electronics as a rep. He must have been in his 40s, and that's a job for someone in their late teens and early 20s. And it would have been, I think it probably would have been almost humiliating for him to take it, but I think he took it because he saw a path. And within, I don't remember the time frame, but certainly under 5 years, he was a manager in there, and that's where he stayed for the rest of his career and was the marketing manager for the whole of Ireland, and just a huge success. But I even remember that being an eye-opener for me, going, he had to step way back. He was a rep when he was 18, and he had to go back to do that as a grown adult with wife, kids, family. But he did it because he was I'm just going to work at this now and be the best rep, and then the best sales manager, and the best marketing manager. And so he's definitely the biggest one on me in terms of, like, just never sitting around. Like,
you can see why. Like, that's a massive pivot to have to make.
Huge.
Yeah. And also then a big financial mountain to have to overcome as well.
Yeah.
Especially with a family.
Definitely. It's like, it prepares you
Yeah.
You know, for those situations that crop up, you
Yeah.
know, like seeing that kind of focus and dedication, like you realize, you go, no, that's what you need to do. It's all well and good having this job or that job, or bringing in this money and getting this company car, that car, whatever, and this holiday. Like that's the work. That's what matters. You know what I mean? So.
And do you look towards people in your industry at all as well as a role model? You're quite successful, so it's hard to look at other people.
Well, I would honestly, I would look at Ian Dempsey.
Yeah.
I would think Ian is someone who is a little bit older than I am, but is literally doing the thing I always wanted to do when I started in radio, which is work on national radio. I'm now right beside him, and it's one of my proudest kind of, you know, feelings is that it's Ian Dempsey who wakes everybody up in the morning and gives them all to me. You know, that's like, if you told me that, even I joined Today FM in 2014, even 10 years ago, I wouldn't have believed that, but here I am, you know, and it happened very quickly. So Ian, I would look up to. I just think to be able to be that consistent, to do what he's done for all of his career, like the level of effort and dedication just cannot be undersold there. And people think you just go up in the morning, you play a few songs on the radio. Like honestly, come into a radio studio, see what goes on. You know, it like the amount of prep, the amount of work, the amount of dedication, the alarm going off, I'm sure for Ian at 4 something every morning. Mine goes off at 5:40 every morning. Like it's, you know, you have to be fully committed, and that's a huge inspiration to me. But also Dermot, like Dermot we brought out the best in each other professionally for 21 years, and I will never underestimate that. Like he's a peer, obviously, but just the magic that we had together and still have together, but particularly in the radio studio, like, you know, that was such a huge bearing on, you know, how I felt about going to work every day, how I felt about doing the hard stuff and getting up at the crack of dawn, and the relentlessness of radio, and it's every link, move on to the next thing, move on to the next thing, next day, next week, like everything is just nonstop. Having your best friend there beside you, inspiring you and motivating you and supporting you, like just like, that's a massive, massive thing for me, and it always has been.
And like you finished each other's sentences and, you know, got each other's jokes. Was it a big change then going to hosting the whole show and having it the Dave Moore show?
Yeah, it's wild. Like, I suppose it's a hard one to explain. Obviously, you do something a certain way for 21 years. It's going to feel very different when you do it a different way. But at the same time, it was absolutely natural. It made perfect sense. And the wrench, I think, that the listeners had didn't happen to us, because we knew from 4 years out, we knew that this isn't going to continue forever in its current guise. It just can't.
Yeah.
Because Dermot is motivated by other things and wants to do something different. And the relentlessness of radio it really means it's not impossible, but it's so hard to do anything else at a very committed level. I still write music. I still play the guitar every day. I still have a studio and go and record stuff. I still coach my kids' football teams 6 nights a week. Like, there's lots you can do, but I'm not a professional coach. I'm not a professional musician, other than the odd time when I do get paid for something. I do it because I love it.
It's hard to put all of your focus in many different...
Yeah, and that's the juggling of life, I think, which is great. You've got, you know, your family responsibilities, your work responsibilities, your friends, your interests. You can balance all that, but your work is your work. When you are doing radio, you probably can't work at anything else without something else suffering. And that was what was happening to him. He was trying to do 10 things, and inevitably things suffer. And he was like, I can't do this. I need to do something on my terms. And in order for me to do that, I have to give up the radio thing. Now, this isn't a Dermot interview.
Yeah.
You can interview him at a later date about that. But certainly, you know, he needed to do this thing he's doing. And I couldn't be happier for him. I couldn't be prouder of him. Like, the fact that he is brave enough to take a step into an entirely new industry, but he's done it really well. He's built up a business over a number of years. That's what I was saying. Like, this wasn't a big shock to anyone. who knew him, you know.
How was the pressure at that time? Because as a listener, there was so much hype around the show changing.
It was so hard. Like, that was probably the hardest thing, was trying to gauge how you guys, the listeners, would react to the news. Because why wouldn't you be really upset? And why wouldn't Dave on his own not be enough? Because you had Dermot and Dave for 20 odd years, you know. So I think the pressure there and the pressure internally, to be fair, you know, like, it's a business. The Dermot and Dave as a brand is a very attractive brand. It's an established brand. It's the longest running duo in radio history, honestly, certainly in Ireland, and I think in the world. So having the sales and the marketing and the promotions teams turn around and look at you and go, well, what are you going to do? Because you need to now be sellable at the same price or more than Dermot and Dave was, but now you're losing that guy, on top of he's no longer in the studio and you have to broadcast it, you know. So the pressure was huge, but I'll never forget, we made the announcement on a Tuesday after a bank holiday. And obviously the outpouring of sadness and grief, you know, that people were going to miss Dermot. The next day changed to, we're going to miss Dermot because we announced that I'm staying. Dave, we've got your back. We're with you. And honest to God, that changed everything for me. Everything. Because I knew the vast majority of my listeners were going to go, no, if you're staying, we're staying. We're here with you. And I was very honest. I said, like, look, it's a whole new world for me. I don't know what it's going to be like. They're like, whatever you do, we'll be here. And it's proven that, like, I've grown listenership since Dermot left, which is wild. But that belief and trust and confidence from the audience is what my show is all about. It's connection with the audience. That's all I ever want to do.
Which is exactly what you were saying earlier, that you bring your own personality, you bring your own vulnerability to that show, and it came then in your favor, which I think is amazing.
If I had been super cool, I'm going to do it, like, you know, like, people probably would have gone, okay, fine, that guy's doing that guy's thing. But, like, I was open, and I was like, that's like, I'm breaking it. Like, what's going to happen? I'm going to start my show in 2 weeks' time. It's going to be me on my own. Like, I'd love if you would come with me, and they did, you know. So yeah, no, you're absolutely right. That's a really important ingredient, is that authenticity of, like, you know, people, because I think sometimes people can believe that you're a version of yourself when you're a public profile, whether that's television, radio, music, football, whatever. But, like, I'm not. Like I'm genuinely, like, okay, I don't say my own name and Today FM when I'm having a conversation with normal people, but, like, the same, if you take away the bit at the start where I go, that was Taylor Swift, it's Today FM, I'm Dave Moore. Like, if you take that away, the next bit you're going to get is exactly the same as having a conversation with me. Yeah. If we're sitting in a cafe or a pub or watching a match or what, like, well, it should be, I hope so. But I think that's one of the key reasons why people identify with me, why they understand that it's not, I'm not putting something on, you know, like the other day, a listener made a Lego portrait of me, and, like, it's all of my personality traits. I'm watching Elf. I'm in a Man United shirt, drinking a cup of tea with a drill for DIY and a sneakers box beside me and guitars hanging on the wall. I'm like, this guy knows everything that makes up my personality, because he listens and he's bought into it. And when he thinks of me, these are the things he thinks of. And that is me. Like, there's not much missing there. You know what I mean? Like, so I think that's a key driver for me to continue and to be inspired, is the fact that the listeners are there with you and bought into everything you're talking about, totally invested. And that's what I love more than anything, is interacting with and connecting with the listener. That's the number one thing for me.
To finish off, I like to ask some kind of off the wall financial question.
Go for it.
I would love to know, apart from bills and the mortgage, which we all have to pay, what do you least like spending money on?
Wow. My kids' Revolut requests. Yeah, that's a tough one. I don't really understand all of the direct debits that come out of my account. So sometimes, for whatever reason, you might have to sit down and go through them all and try and understand them. And I'm like, should I be paying this company this money for that thing? I don't know what that is. Like life insurance versus assurance. As I said, my dad sold it. I could have asked him when he was still alive what it was all about. Mortgage protection. Like, I don't know what any of these things are. And I just go, someone at some point told me I had to have it, and I go, fine. And then I kind of go, it's 25 years later. Am I still paying €70 a month to someone that I don't need? I genuinely don't know. So it's not that I couldn't pinpoint the individual things, but I absolutely freak out at those things every now and again. I'll like bolt up awake at night and go, do I have the right insurance for this? I don't know anything. Have I got the right windows to have this house insurance? Like, I don't. So that stuff to me is, I'm terrible. And then the whole like changing utilities and shopping around and all that. So every time I see my ESB bill and my gas bill come in, I'm like, I should probably have moved that 2 years ago. So those things, I'm not good. So that stuff freaks me out a little bit. But yeah, I think they're the things that maybe make me think twice. Everything else, I'm okay with it all.
Thank you so much for coming on, Dave. It's been an absolute pleasure to interview you for once. And yes, I'm excited to bring you on again sometime.
Listen, I will be here, and best luck with the podcast.
Thank you.
Listen, it's going to be brilliant, and I'll be tuning in every week.
Thank you, Dave.
Thank you.
Thank you. What an exciting episode from Dave Moore. It's so interesting to hear the different paths he's taken, and also how he has completely changed around his career from what he thought he'd be doing in college. I'm so excited for you to meet my next guest on my next episode, who has a very exciting career in travel.